the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm conventions. It's 10 o'clock, so we'll get started so that we have enough time at the end for some questions and answers. So today, we'll be telling you about the activities on the transboundary movements of plastic waste that are taking place under the Basel Convention Plastic Waste Partnership. We have a number of speakers lined up, and so without further ado, I will take you through an overview of the program for the day, for our webinar. So I'll just start by giving you a very brief introduction to the Plastic Waste Partnership, and that presentation will be followed by an overview of a specific activity by the Group on Transboundary Movements, looking into collecting information on how parties and others are implementing the Basel Convention plastic waste amendments. Following that, Ms. Seika Sano from the Japanese Ministry of Environment will be guiding us through how her country is implementing the amendments, followed by a presentation by Ms. Sophie Seacott from URIC on specifications sheet that her organization is developing. And this presentation was to be followed by one by Ms. Adina Adler from ISRI. Unfortunately, because of the time difference, Adina could not be with us this morning. She's located in the US. But if you're interested in understanding more about the ISRI specifications, she gave a very helpful presentation on that topic during the webinar session that was held on Tuesday. And the recording is available on our website. So I encourage you to go and revisit that. Then last but not least, Cyrine Rached from Gaia will be sharing her views of her and her partner organizations on what it means to transpose the Basel Convention plastic waste amendments. And at the end of this, we will be taking questions to all the speakers on these various topics. The Plastic Waste Partnership was established by the Conference of the Parties to the Basel Convention to get business, governments and business organizations and a broad range of stakeholders, including civil society, to work together to find solutions to this recognized problem of massive plastic waste pollution. And in the long term, the goal is to eliminate the discharge of plastic waste and microplastics to the environment, including the marine environment. It currently has 110 member entities, and it's still open for other members to join. So I'd like to invite you to visit the website of the partnership to learn more about its activities. And in case you would like to join, to please send me an email. The partnership works through its project groups. And at the first meeting of the project group in Seychelles in 2020, was it 2020 already? Yes, the working group of the partnership established 4 project groups working on different aspects of along the value chain of plastic waste, of plastics. And today we'll be focusing on the work of project group 3, which has to do with the transboundary movement of plastic waste. But there's also a project group working upstream on issues related to waste prevention and minimization, and the second group working on looking at best practices and to promote and enhance plastic waste recycling. And finally, the 4th project groups works at on outreach, education, and awareness raising. As you can see, we have a diverse group of members from government, industry, and civil society co-chairing these project groups. The impetus for establishing the Plastic Waste Partnership was the adoption by the Basel Convention Conference of the Parties of what we call the Plastic Waste Amendments. Essentially, the parties to the convention agreed to increase the scope of plastic waste that are subject to the controls of the convention. And that was done by these changes to the annexes shown on this slide. The speaker in the next presentation will tell you more in detail about this. So this was just to set the scene for you to understand. Now, Project Group 3 has been tasked with several activities. Given the newness of the partnership and we are just now at the stage of collecting information to set baseline and understand the gaps that need to be filled. So the activities listed here are most of them centered around a collection of information on various aspects related to the transboundary movements of plastic waste. In the next presentation, Mr. Alberto Capra will be telling you about the second activity highlighted in green here. But the third activity of the project group is looking at collecting best practices on enforcement in relation to plastic waste movement. And this activity is led by the World Customs Organization. It's about to start soon. And the fourth activity of the project group will be then looking at collecting data on transboundary movement of plastic waste, the challenges in doing that, and how new technologies can help in that regard, and also for controlling illegal traffic. Now, all this information collected will hopefully feed into the first activity, which is meant to build capacity to support parties and countries in the implementation of the plastic waste amendments. In closing, I'd like to mention that the Plastic Waste Partnership has a pilot project program through which it hopes to identify projects that are groundbreaking and can be used to further the objectives of the partnership. There was a recent call for pilot projects, which resulted in 188 proposals submitted. Out of these, 23 proposals were selected for implementation, and 6 of these relate to the activities of Project Group 3 and will take place in Asia. If you're interested in pilot projects, you can consult the web page shown here, and there will surely be a next round of calls. So then you could, of course, participate if appropriate. So that was a very brief tour of the Plastic Waste Partnership. If you would like to join us, or if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to send me an email at the address shown on this slide. So with that, I will finish my presentation, and I will pass the floor to Mr. Alberto Capra, who is one of the co-chairs of Project Group 3 on transboundary movement of plastic waste. Alberto, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Melissa, for the presentation. Well, now I will do some remarks about our work on the activity of the Project Group 3. Please, if you can show the presentation on the screen. The next one, please. Well, as Melissa said, we are working on prioritized activities. The ones that we are dealing with today is the collection of information on actions taken by countries to implement the amendments to the Convention on Plastic Waste, on their interpretation, and on the challenges experienced in preparing for implementation. Next one, please. As you can remember, the Basel Convention Plastic Waste Amendments has several aspects that we can highlight in this screen. The Annex 2 was amendment. We have a new Y48, which is plastic waste including mixture of such wastes, excluding two types of waste that are classified under the Annexes 8 and 9. The Annex 8, which is A3210, clarifies the scope of plastic waste that are hazardous, and Annex 9, B3011, plastic waste presumed not to be hazardous, destined for recycling and almost free from contamination and other type of wastes, certain single polymers or mixtures, and other plastics. This amendment came into force on January this year, and some of the questions that are important and relevant is for Annex 2, Y48, and Annex 8, A3210. This kind of plastic has to go on the previous informed consent, so the PIC procedure. So the pre-informed consent has to be applied in this type of ways, not in the case of the Annex 9. The next one, please. So these kind of plastic waste that are not being on the PIC procedure are plastic waste listed below, and it has to be destined for recycling in an environmentally sound manner, as all the waste that are covered by the Basel Convention, and are all free from contamination and other type of wastes. This kind of plastic waste almost exclusively consistent of one non-halogenated polymer, including but not limited to the polymers that you can see on the screen. Plastic waste almost exclusively consists of one pure resin or condensation product, including but not limited to the ones that are listed there, like formaldehyde resins, phenolformaldehyde resins, and others. Plastic waste almost exclusively consists of one of the following fluorinated polymers, and you have there the ones that are covered. A mixture of plastic waste consisting of polyethylene, polypropylene, polyethylene terephthalate, provide that are destined for separate recycling of each materials and in environmental sound manner and almost free from contamination and other types of wastes. These kind of wastes are our own international and national specifications may offer a point of reference, and that's what our project route is going on. So these are the wastes that in a way are covered by the Basel Convention, but are classified not to be on the PIC procedure. Next, please. So in our project group 3, some activities are being prioritized for this period of time, and the outputs that we are looking for are compilation of national and international specifications related to this kind of plastic waste that are almost free from contamination and other type of wastes, and almost exclusively for shipments of plastic waste destined for recycling. Another activity is compilation of information and actions taken to implement the amendments to the Convention of Plastic Wastes, including information regarding any adopted measures and challenges experienced in preparing for implementation. This activity is co-led by Argentina. Agustin Hart is working on that, and Sims Recycling and Patricia Whiting is as well in the co-lead activity. The next one, please. So, on regards of information on national and international specifications, calls were made to members of the partnership. Information is available, if available, at the website you can see there. We have examples of approachings by several countries like Japan, Switzerland, and United Kingdom by now. And we have examples of a specification provided by organizations like EURIC and ISRI. The next one, please. Regarding information and actions taken to implement the amendments and challenges experienced in preparing for implementation, questionnaires were sent to parties and stakeholders in December 2020. These questions highlighted the awareness of the specifications of how the countries are implementing the amendment, measures and actions taken to implement the amendments, including type of measures, and challenges encountered, and what be helpful to address them. So the next screen, we have some results of this questionnaire. Next, please. So on the question, are you aware of are there in use in your country any national or international specifications in relation to almost free contamination of all type of wastes, and almost exclusively for transboundary movements of plastic we are destined? We have 30 answers, 27 that they don't have by now, and 9 that they have. So the next one, if the previous answer is no, so the question were if there are methods, approaches in use, for example, other types of voluntary norms, industry standards, technical regulations, to support the implementation of the requirement relating to the theme of almost free from contamination. And out of the 27 answers, we have 16 that not, that there is no being implemented by now, 7 that yes, and 4 that they will not have an answer. And so I think that next, please, the next steps. The questionnaire has been extended to 29th of February this month. So I invite you, if you're parties or stakeholders, to complete the questionnaires. You have the information there to enter to give us the responses. Information collected to be shared with working group on updating the technical guidelines of ESM of plastic waste under the Basel Convention is of course being on. It's still being on, so you have the chance to do some feedback about this. And this information it will be considered at the second meeting of the partnership that is it's been performed in April 2029 for further action. Next, please. So we invited you to complete the questionnaire, and as Melissa said before, to join the partnership and, of course, our project group thing. So that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Alberto, for the clear presentation and highlighting what this activity is about. And really, the purpose is to collect information on the challenges and how countries are interpreting these complex amendments. Because as you could see from one of the slides, the B entry has a number of terms that are not fully defined and on which there's no full agreement among parties. And since this has to do with transboundary movements of plastic waste, then of course this can give rise to some issues. So we hope that the information collected will help to further devise ways to facilitate this process. And as highlighted by Alberto also, the information will be shared with the working group now tasked with updating the technical guidelines on the environmentally sound management of plastic waste, which is a group under the Basel Convention working in parallel with this with the Plastic Waste Partnership. So if you're interested in that aspect, there's also on the slide a webpage directing you to the work of that group, and they are currently discussing a lot of technical aspects, namely having to do with what type of plastic waste, what does recycling mean, all these questions that of course are crucial for interpreting the plastic waste amendments. Yeah. So thank you, Dan, for showing that slide. And so now we will move to our next presenter, Ms. Seika Sano, who will be explaining how her government has gone forward with implementing the amendments. Seika, the floor is yours.
Very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, quite well. Thank you.
Good, thank you. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me as a presenter for this meeting. It is a very great pleasure and honor to introduce the Japanese criteria for the plastic waste here. So I will give a short presentation about the Japanese criteria for distinguish plastic waste from the waste which is subject to the Basel control from the others. Yes. So the aims of this criteria is to define the scope of the plastic waste, which is covered by the B3011, which is not controlled by the Basel, from the and the scope of the plastic waste covered by the Y48, which is, of course, you know, the under the regulation of the Basel Convention. So, as explained earlier in this meeting, we have the difficulty to define the scope of those types of plastic because the convention text includes some of the tricky wording, such as the exclusively consisting or others. And in the Japanese legislation, however, we do not have such word as a translation, direct translation. However, we face the similar problem that even in Japanese legislation, we do not have the very clear language to explain this. So this is the reason why we developed this criteria. And we would like to show the clear example in this document to the stakeholders and exporter and importers so that they can have the clear understanding of what is the under control or not control. So this document, this criteria is aligned with the structure of the B3011 and of course Y48 as a mirror entry of the B3011. It consists of two parts. First one is the criteria applicable to the plastic waste without a mixture of the plastic resins. And the second one is the criteria applicable to the plastic waste, a mixture of different plastic. As you can see in the box in below, this is the B3011 entry, and this entry has the two parts, which one is the plastic waste mixed with the different plastic resins, and another one is not. First one, let me explain that criteria applicable to the plastic with the mixture of the plastic resins, without a mixture of the plastic resins, which is the first one. So the plastic waste that fulfills all the criteria introduced in the from the A to D in the box below. There are the wastes, if the waste fulfill the criteria below, could be out of the scope of the control, which is you do not pick procedure when you export or import those type of plastic. So first criterion A is free from the contamination such as food and drink, dirt, oils, and others. B, not mixed with the substances other than plastic. C, consisting of the single type of plastic resin. D, processed or arranged for recycling. So from the criterion A to C, we developed this criteria because when you literally interpret the almost free from contamination and other types of waste, then those criteria could be drawn as a result of those kind of direct interpretation of those wording. And the criterion D this is developed since the plastic waste which are processed or arranged for the recycling are less likely to cause the environmental pollution in the importing countries. And of course, those type of plastic are much more close to the products rather than the waste. The next slide, this slide and the next slide will introduce the specific types of the plastic which is not controlled, not in the scope of the control. The first one is pelletized plastics. Yes, as you can see in the picture on the left side. And the second one is transparent or single-colored plastic flakes or fluffs. So the pellets, flakes, and fluffs generally satisfy all the criteria I introduced in the last slide, A to D, since they're washed, sorted, and procured as recycled materials in the course of the processing. However, in the second example, transparent or single-colored plastic, the reason why we limit the color to the transparent or single-colored is that we have the problem that it is kind of challenging to distinguish the mixed colored plastic from the plastic with other materials or with the contamination, so that if the plastic are the transparent or single, then we can easily it's easy to know those plastic are single, consist of the single resins. And then go next slide. So the third example of the plastic waste out of scope of control is the plastic waste in the form of seats, rolls, or belts that were discharged as a byproduct from the manufacturing process. So the surplus or unused plastic generated in the process of the manufacturing products in the factory, for example, shown in the as a you can see the picture of those plastic waste in the left side as a under the number 3, and there we can say they're quite clean and without a mixture, without mixing with other materials or the cutters, because they're discharged from the manufacturing processes. So. And the last example of the plastic is the polystyrene form, which is the PS generally in the form of the ingot. This is a very general product or waste, you can name it, but this is a very general form of the plastic exported. And they're, of course, they're washed, there's been washed, and they're out of any other the contamination or the dirt, and in the process of making the ingots, they're pretty much becoming clean. So those are the reasons that we see those plastic waste could be out of the scope of the control. So the following figures, the pictures shows that the scope of the control of the industrial waste and the used electronic equipment or the e-waste. So as you can see, the picture on the right side are controlled. Of course, they look very hard to recycle because they have some contamination and a mixed cutter with dirt. So we think those needs the pick to export. However, the pictures on the left side, it's they would not be controlled by the regulation, meeting with the conditions I introduced before. So the second criteria, there there are the criteria applicable to the plastic waste without a mixture of waste mixture. Oh, this is typo. This is with mixture of plastic. I'm sorry. This is the plastic waste with a mixture of the different type of plastic. So as you can see in the B3011 entry, we have some exception. So the specific type of the plastic could be mixed when they're exported without pick procedure. There are the PE, PP, and PET. We can assume that those plastic are the PET bottles the PET bottle consists with those type of the plastic. Specifically the PET bottles with labels and caps. So the PET bottles waste that fulfills all the criteria A to C below becomes out of the scope of the control. So, and what is the criteria for those PET bottles waste? Number one, A, sorted and not contained in plastic resins other than bottles, caps, and labels, or other materials. B, washed and free from contamination, such as drinks, dirt, and others. The last one is C, shredded and in the form of the flakes. So the last criterion, C, is we think that it's a necessary requirement for meeting the B condition, since plastic waste cannot be deemed washed unless otherwise they're shredded. So you cannot wash inside of the bottle without pouring the water in the bottle. But however, this is unrealistic in the industrial process, so it needs to be shredded. So, however, we have the one specific problem in this country, which is that PET bottle labels produced in this country often consist with a PAS, which is not covered by this specific provision. So all the labels need to be removed to be exempt from the control. That's our criteria said. However, the only plastic waste with a very small amount of the labels or caps after undergoing the sorting process becomes, of course, exempt from the regulation, because it is very, very difficult to remove such a very tiny piece of the labels or caps in the plastic flakes. This is the last slide. So the pictures on the upside, or the plastic waste, are not controlled, and the pictures on the bottom side are plastic will be controlled. Plastic waste will be controlled. So that those shredded and uniform the flakes, which has undergone the sorting process, are exempt from the Basel Act. Therefore, you can see the little bit labels and caps in the pictures on the upside. However, they're safely recycled. We can say they're safely recycled and environment don't matter. However, the label that you can see in the picture, the bottom, so they're too much. So it needs the pick procedure, I think. So I will stop here, and I'm very happy to answer the question from the floor after the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Seika, for this presentation. I'm sure there will be many questions for you at the end because of the interest in how of course, all this is enforced, also how these criteria are implemented and enforced in Japan. So we'll hold off until the end of all the presentations to ask you those questions. Now we'll turn to the next presenter, who's Miss Sophie Seacott from URIC, who will be telling us about some specification sheets that her organization has developed. Sophie, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So first, I'd like to thank the Basel Convention Secretariat for giving me the opportunity to present our specification sheets. So I'm the Vice President of the Plastic branch of EURIC. EURIC is a European Recycling Industries Confederation. And I'll just start with what the other presenters already highlighted, which is the purpose of our discussion today. So when the Basel amendment was adopted in the late 2019, it very clearly appeared to be a priority for our industry to define, to build a common understanding of what would be Y48, B3011, and for the European Union, what would be the MARO codes, which are EU48 and EU3011. This is very important, and especially in the European context, because as you may know, Y48 export from the EU to third-party countries is not only controlled but prohibited. It was very important for us to have a common understanding with competent authorities and the custom officers. So, as the other presenters commented, we focused on those quite blurred definitions that are included in the plastic amendments, which are almost exclusively consisting of almost free from contamination, mixtures of plastic waste. We also obviously focused on the fourth very important word, which is environmentally sound manner for the recycling. So our question was, how can we address those change? And what we wanted to give is our understanding of what are our technical requirements for an efficient and environmental sound recycling. Unfortunately, unlike our paper and cardboard colleagues, the plastic recycling industry in Europe do not have homogeneous quality standard. So we had to report. We wanted to work to report on the average values of recycling workable impurities. And I'd just like to highlight here that thresholds have an S, meaning that we need different thresholds because there is no such thing as one single plastic waste and one single plastic recycling method. So we needed, what appeared very soon and very clearly is that we needed as an industry different quality threshold adapted to different waste streams. So how did we work? Basically, the first step was the very basic one, was to review the meaning of the Basel changes, then to prepare a generic format for the plastic waste specification sheets to know what do we need as an industry as information to determine if a waste is correct or not correct, and review what is already applied in other industry sectors, for instance, in the cardboard and paper recycling industry. And then the fourth step was to make a review of the existing and currently used plastics-based standards. Especially in Europe, we focused on the quality standards implemented by the Extended Producer Responsibility Scheme. That would be for France Citeo quality standard, in Italy Coroplast standards, and in Germany Grünepunkt quality standards, because those are the quality that are available on the European market, and that's how we determine our our recycling process. Then we prepare a list of the most often exported plastic types and formats, and then a draft set of possible specification to be used as a reference within Basel. And we shared those on our websites to be open for discussion and discussion, basically. So, as I said, in Europe and in the world, we don't have standardized quality specifications. So where do URIC specification stand within the commercial organization of our industry? Basically, our standards are not meant to replace, but they are meant to be compatible with contractual agreements, which can be more stringent than the specification sheets. They are meant to be compatible as well with national quality standards, in particular for Europe with EPR scheme quality standards. And also they are meant to be compatible with the future Europe-wide quality grades that we are currently working on with a European Center for Normalization. So what we did is that we worked on three kinds of specification sheets. The first one was a specification sheet for packaging. The second one was an all stream for flakes, an all stream specification sheet for flakes, because there is a huge diversity of flakes waste, and we needed to have a common understanding of what is authorized for export and what is not. And a specific stream specification sheets for technical plastics from WE and ELVs, which are much more diverse. The first important point in our specification sheet is that we work on the basis of an object-based purity, meaning that object-related items such as the caps or the labels are considered secondary components. They are not considered as impurities. This is very important to understand, because when you have a discussion with a custom officer, this is a very basic pragmatic question: is this an impurity or is this not? For our industry, definitely this is not an impurity, because we are able to deal with it in an environmentally sound manner. So how are our plastic waste specification sheets structured? Basically, here you will have the target material item, which is described with this the minimum purity expected. The allowed impurities, which are first the product-related ones, as I say, so that would be the caps, the neck rings, the labels, slips, which are also going to be component and which are part of the above percentage, and then all the impurities, which can be non-product related or strictly prohibited contaminants, which must on the total be less than the final number at the bottom of the page. So in this specific case for PET bottles, we would accept like maximum 5% of other rigid plastic packaging, but then the total of the impurities must not be higher than this 5%. This is the maximum. And for some items such as glass, wood, stones, this is definitely prohibited contaminants, which should not be present in the base. As for flakes, this was quite a point of interrogation for us, because the status of flakes is very different in Europe. In some countries it considers waste, and in some other countries it's considered non-waste. So our position that we support the classification of flakes as non-waste if they are fit for integration within a manufacturing process, for direct integration into a manufacturing process. For the others, then we propose this generic 90% purity threshold, because this is what we can deal with on a generic basis as an recycling industry. So here you will have the list of all the specification sheets we developed. So as you will see, for the plastic packaging, purity levels will go from 85% for LDPE films to 95% for most of the rigid items. And for technical plastics, mostly from ELV and WEES, there the ranges is much wider, because we can go as low as 65, because we have currently recycling process that are designed to deal with those kind of impurity, especially when it is metals impurities, which are really into the polymer. So what we want to highlight here is that the reality of waste stream is that we don't have a one-size-fits-all. We have many types of plastics, many uses, and many technologies to treat them. So we really need a really detailed approach of what is fit or not to be classified as B3011. Well, I'd like to thank you everyone for your attention, and I'll be happy to answer the questions at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie, for giving us insight into the industry's perspective on specifications and allowable contamination limit, and what you think about around the thresholds values. We will wait until the end of all the presentations to take questions. So then I'd like to invite our next presenter, Ms. Cyrine Rachet from Gaia, to then give us the views of her organization. Cyrine, please.
Thank you so much. So I work with the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives, or Gaia, and we're very grateful for this opportunity today, because within our network and within the movement within which we work on plastics, called Break Free from Plastic, we have several groups who have been experiencing in their communities and investigating the consequences of the fact that up to 1st of January, we didn't have requirements to limit contamination in plastic waste shipments, and we didn't have controls. So what I hope to do today is give you just some evidence to show the implications of different approaches to contamination, and the relationship between this issue and the issue of environmentally sound recycling, which is, as you know, also a requirement for B3011. And finally, I'm going to comment briefly on the Article 11 challenge as we see it. So in our understanding, in our experience, having looked at the issue since before the amendments were passed, the reasons why contamination limits would be useful and clear, in addition to those mentioned actually by our colleagues from Japan, so challenges with translation, is that first and foremost for us, there's no working guarantee at the moment for environmentally sound recycling of B3011 shipments in the countries of export. We think that the notion of environmentally sound recycling is extremely important, but we have yet to operationalize it in a consistent and verifiable manner. The second challenge in our view is that we don't have transparency right now on the kinds of emissions that are arising from recycling operations. These could be VOC emissions, these could be emissions through wastewater from the washing phase as well. The third point is that we don't have transparency also, even if we had, let's say, a relatively clean recycling operation that has some rejects, we don't have transparency on how those are managed, right? And it's, as you know, the mismanagement of the rejects, of the residual waste from those shipments, which has triggered the biggest challenges to date. And finally, we think that strong contamination limits can also act as an incentive for exporting countries to, let's say, clean up their process upstream from waste collection and sorting, from design of products, and also may encourage them to relocalize part of their plastic waste management chain in order sometimes to avoid controls. And so for us, this is a welcome incentive to focus on prevention and redesign. This is a case study. It's an investigation into a recycling facility in Ecuador called Productos Paraíso, which has been importing for a number of years agricultural waste from Mississippi in the United States. It's mainly PE agricultural plastic. And it turns out that for the past 6 years, the company had been getting rid of its wastewater directly into a stream that ends up, joins a few rivers and ends up in the Pacific. And as a result, the stream became a dead stream. The water was black, and there was a lot of chemicals and microplastics, as you can see in the picture. And this specific, let's say, pollution has been recorded for the last 6 years. So it's not a one-off incident that happened and that has been remediated. And in this case, it's useful to note that this operation required a lot of washing for its plastic recycling because the agricultural plastics came into Ecuador from the United States with 50% of dirt. So dirt, a contaminant which could seem innocuous, which could seem inoffensive, actually required a lot of washing, was an extra cost to the importer because the importer pays duties based on the weight of the waste they're importing. And also here we see the consequences of washing when filtering is not properly done. And if you can't, I think you can't click the link here, but I will paste it in the chat in case you're interested to read more. So unfortunately, we can't play video, but this is a little, I'll paste it in the chat as well, a little video investigation by Greenpeace into the consequences of plastic waste trade in Turkey, and notably the mismanagement of residuals from the recycling process. So the residuals get open burnt and dumped in the environment near streams, affecting ecosystems, affecting livestock of farmers in the areas where they get dumped, and affecting human health as well. So I'll share the link to the video. And this is a diagram by IPEN, which summarizes the ways in which the residual waste from the recycling system, once the wastes are imported and arrive, some are diverted to recycling, the residuals are dumped and open burnt. Then these toxics that arise from these open burning operations bioaccumulate in the food chain and ultimately affect human health. So that's a little diagram there. And the link, which again I'll post into the chat, is to a series of investigations by IPEN in different countries around the world, looking at toxic contamination of the food chain due to open burning of waste. And a lot of these are plastic waste, some of them are e-waste as well, and you may be familiar with their work, I'm sure. So this is a summary of Gaia's recommendations for transposing the amendments, which are also available in our briefing. and just to go over them briefly. The first challenge that we see is actually, we've talked a lot about contamination, but we think there's a larger issue, which is that, as mentioned during Tuesday's webinar, there can be some challenges in distinguishing Y46 household waste from Y48, the mixed and dirty plastics that are subject to prior consent. And obviously, we ourselves are not entirely clear, right, where RDF, refuse-derived fuel, would apply, how it would be controlled. And we are struggling currently with the opacity of the RDF trade. And we really believe that whether it's Y46 or Y48, it has to be clearly controlled in conformity with the convention. And it's very related to us with the environmental harm that we've seen from plastics in general. Because RDF is thermally treated, is burnt, is incinerated. And obviously when the content in halogenated waste is above a certain threshold, we have some serious challenges there, in addition to carbon emissions and other. So that's the first challenge for us, and we believe that the implementing legislation for these amendments can be an opportunity to clarify the controls on RDF. So in terms of contamination limits, I've exposed why we believe that it's important to be ambitious. The limit that we favor is the limit that is used by Hong Kong at the moment, which is a 0.5% limit for non-hazardous contaminants. Obviously, the hazardous ones, the toxic ones, we would prefer an approach to 0% contamination. Also, ISRI in the presentation on Tuesday had referred to the fact that they also support no contamination at all with hazardous contaminants. And we think that there could be an interesting role for exporters to have the burden of proof to show the lack of contamination, right? Because if all the burden of measuring and controlling rests on the customs, either in the exporting or in the importing country, it becomes an incredible challenge. And as we know, waste is not the priority stream for customs and enforcement to control. There are other streams of illegal materials and trade that have higher priority for them. So we really would like to see the implementing legislation putting a responsibility on the importers to demonstrate and be transparent on those contamination rates. Right, and while industry specifications have a clear role in industry transactions and in setting standards, we have not seen at the moment industry specifications that satisfy the requirements under the new amendments. We think they're useful, but they're not useful to be looked at as a substitute for a clear contamination limit. And I think, as our friends in Europe have said, from an industry perspective, the limits are going to be very complex, right? There might be different ones for different waste types, for different waste streams, for different contaminants. But at the same time, we need something that's enforceable at the borders. And so perhaps we need a figure, a threshold within which then industry can be more ambitious on specific contaminants within their own specifications. The issue of thermosets, I know we haven't discussed much today, the thermosets and the 5 fluorinated polymers, which are currently on B3011. If we really look at that listing, we don't see how those plastics can comply with the requirement of environmentally sound recycling in the destination country, because we've analyzed these plastics in our briefing, and we've seen that most of them are very challenging to recycle, and also that when they're mismanaged, there are particularly concerning hazards that can arise, some of which for us would merit even a hazard classification, as hazardous waste. So our recommendation in transposing the amendments for national legislation is really to recommend for the control of these wastes until the COP has the opportunity to examine the issue again. We hope it does. And I think, as came out of several presentations, and I myself was very interested to hear from our colleagues from Japan, and I have some questions there, is to what extent we can use those amendments and this contamination challenge, this B3011 challenge, to look at measures further upstream. These can be phase outs of unnecessary single-use plastics, especially those single-use items that are composite products, and for example, they would never fit in B3011. It could also be a redesign of products, for example, to allow the easy separation of labels from bottles, especially where these would not fit the PET allowed mixture under B3011. But we also think that it can go beyond increasing domestic recycling capacity, going back to our principle of proximity, right, under the Basel Convention, integrating waste pickers as municipal service providers, providing green jobs, etc. And of course, at Gaia, our specialty is separate collection at source in partnership with waste pickers. And we've seen in our experience that that is a great way to reduce contamination from the start. And I'll conclude on a reflection that we have had at Gaia, but also with colleagues at the Center for International Law and the Basel Action Network. While we understand the reasons why some countries might have felt the need to have and feel the need to have Article 11 agreements or invoke Article 11 agreements in order not to implement the Basel rules as they are in all their trade flows, we do believe that there is a slippery slope. So as you know, the EU, they will implement the amendments as they are and go beyond them for their trade leaving the Union. But within the Union, they're installing lighter controls because they consider the EU as an Article 11 agreement, i.e. they consider that it provides equivalent or higher protection than Basel for those plastic wastes. And we have seen after the EU has invoked this, a number of other derogations come up. We have the US-Canada arrangement signed last summer, invoked as an Article 11 agreement, even though it is a non-binding arrangement. So that is a bit of a puzzle for us. And we also respectfully believe that Japan's declaration that within the OECD, it will continue to greenlist PVC, we respectfully believe it does not really work as an Article 11 agreement because the OECD basically currently only controls the hazardous plastic trade. So to find out more, we have detailed our proposals, our thinking in two briefings, the Gaia briefing and the briefing by the Center for International Law, which is actually a legal opinion on the relationship between the OECD non-consensus determination of the Basel amendments and the amendments themselves. And I'll post the links in the chat so you can access them easily. And that's all for today. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Cyrine, for highlighting some of the issues which actually brought to the fore the urgency of past adopting the amendments. I see that Seika has to leave very soon. And I was wondering whether she can stay on for a few minutes to just take on some questions. Seika?
Yes, I can. Yeah, I have to leave in a very few minutes, so just a few questions, please. Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Seika. So please, from the floor, if you have questions for Seika, raise your hands and we can take them.